Hello everybody, so today we're going to get into our final video on economics in the 20th century, and we'll talk a little bit more about economic globalization and the developing world. And so one of the areas that we're actually going to start to see a lot of changes with this globalization that we've talked about, this worldwide transnational corporation, international trade agreement thing, is in the former colonies. Economic achievements here will not be easy. You've got race, class, ethnic, and gender divides. There's often a lot of issues educationally and lack of education, as well as issues with the Cold War and the influence of both Russia and the United States. And as you can see here on the right, there are a lot of things that you actually have to do within a developing economy in order to get things going. If you can do it right, you can really have some great things and great changes, but it's not easy. So one great area that you'll start to see changes in Asia and East Asia, with the nations known as the Asian Tigers making quick moves. These are areas like South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore. And what they're going to end up doing is focusing on a lot of production for goods to export. You might recognize some, like for instance, South Korean companies like Samsung or Hyundai. Hong Kong is really on the forefront a lot of economics, and so much so that China actually allows them a bit more independence in developing their economic policies. Singapore is an international home for a lot of businesses if they're going to have a international headquarters. Singapore is a place to have a big presence, of course, right there on the Strait of Malacca, so they're huge. As well as all of these nations dump a lot of money into education. All four of them are some of the top education systems in the entire world when you look at everything from standardized testing as well as to just overall economic achievement. This is something that can happen quick. These are things that have happened in the last 50 years, and you can see these massive moves. And so some of these former colonies, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore and South Korea have achieved some really incredible things. Now, along with that, you also have some big nations that were struggling that will move to success, and one of those is China. In the 1970s, Mao will die, and the guy that takes over him is Deng Xiaoping. And he's going to bring aspects of free market capitalism into the nation. Now, most big things are still controlled by the federal government, like energy and absolutely the media, but they are going to bring some economic changes in, which I will talk about. The other big thing that they actually do is get rid of those 5-year plans and collectivize agriculture that killed tens of millions, and they'll make agricultural changes. So for instance, they'll replace those communes with peasant leased plots of land. Peasants grow what they want, and then they sell that on the open market. And that is going to be a huge, huge change. What really helps China is their factory production and industrialization. Here you see a massive factory in China, and they are all over China. And they will be producing lots of consumer goods. They'll sign recognition and trade agreements with most outside nations with that focus on factory production and industrialization. They'll reopen the Shanghai stock market. And then, according to WTO, from 1981 to 2004, the poverty rate drops from 68% to 10%. Around 500 million people come out of poverty in China, and it's the number 2 economy in the world. Yes, there's lots of things to criticize about it, which I have in other videos, but I mean, you can't deny the power that they have now economically. India is another place that will really start to boom. Of course, India is huge on agricultural products, particularly in cotton, but they'll also get themselves involved in new industries, particularly telecommunications and things like steel, chemicals, auto, and pharmaceutical industries. And I've already talked about like Mahindra and Mahindra, and you're seeing a massive growth today. They're the number 3 economy in the world. Now, their still big issue is poverty. They are actually the top nation as far as number of people in poverty, which is in the millions, and some of the most abject poverty that you can see in the world. But as far as economic improvement is going, they are seeing that. But with such a big population, they're going to have to do more things to directly address that poverty, or else it's going to become increasingly a problem. Now, one area of the world for a long time that was struggling was sub-Saharan Africa, and lots of lack of growth here. For instance, between 1980 and 2000, the average income in Africa's poorest 43 countries went down as much as 25%. Now, you have a variety of general issues here: civil war, climate disasters, and droughts, particularly in places like Ethiopia. I can't understate the disease enough. Now, we've talked about disease a lot this year in AP World History, but the AIDS and Ebola and malaria, it's just absolutely devastating. I mean, AIDS dropped the life expectancy in these countries down to well below 50 years on average, with so many people dying and orphans. You see here is just a picture on the right there of poverty people getting water from. Look at that. I can't even imagine drinking that. But the disease that killed so many people and that constantly can destroy production, and that's what people don't get. Disease, we look at the devastation that it can have on people with deaths, but also when people can't work, you're looking about massive loss of economic production, and that's huge too. And Africa's had to try to got hit with all of those things, whether it's civil war, climate change issues, or disease issues. It was like one thing after another, after so many of them getting that freedom and independence from like the 1950s to like 1980, but then after that, you got to deal with all these other issues. It's really, really hard. But there's a lot of hope moving forward now. AIDS numbers and deaths have been drastically reduced due to better education and access to drugs. Education availability is increasing quite a bit. For example, in 2018, they experienced 3.1% economic growth. In 2019, 3.6% economic growth. Some nations have been even bigger. In 2019, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Tanzania grew by 6%. Areas like Senegal, the Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Guinea are also well above average. In 2019, there are some examples of the growth rates of individual countries and some of the benefits that they have. Also, the development of microfinancing and a banking company called Grameen really influenced this in both Africa and Latin America. And you have the development of these microfinance loans, $450, $250, that allows people to get out from abject poverty to start small businesses or get an education. And this microfinancing has been huge. This is something that we'll talk more about in class, and something I really think you should research a little bit, because it's been transformative in the developing areas of the world. And also, you have massive outside investment from countries like China and companies like Facebook. Yes, there's criticisms to both. A lot of people think that it's just almost like Cold War-ish, that they're trying to just get more influence in these nations, but it also can end up helping them. And so we see, again, this enormous growth. It's not just in like Western Europe and the United States. We see it in China, India, Sub-Saharan Africa, places in Southeast Asia. And economics is stuff that we have to watch, guys. It makes the world go round. We know that for years and years and years now. So hopefully that gave you a good sense of different things that were happening during the 20th century. I'll see you guys soon.